James walked out of the hospital into the warm summer night. The air was thick and heavy, and even though the sun had gone down, it still felt hot. His backpack hung off one shoulder, and his feet hurt from standing all day. He had just finished a long 14-hour shift. His last patient had passed away an hour ago. James had stayed by the man's side until the end. No family came, just James, holding the man's hand until he took his last breath. It made him sad, but James had seen death before. Still, it was never easy. He was tired. His body ached, and his eyes burned, but he felt a bit better knowing he was going home. He had been helping out with the bills. He paid for food, lights, even the internet. It wasn't just Martha and Lydia's house. It was his home too. As he walked through the streets, the night was noisy with cars, loud music in the distance, and insects chirping. It was summer, and everything felt alive. James remembered how things used to be when his mother was still around. She would sit on the porch with sweet tea and smile at him. Life had been simple and full of love, but then his mother got sick, the hospital visits, the quiet goodbye. After her death, everything changed. Martha came soon after. She smiled a lot at first, but it felt fake. When she married James's dad, Colonel Henry, and moved in, things slowly got worse. She didn't yell or hit, but she treated James like he didn't matter. Still, he stayed, because it was the only home he knew. His dad had promised that part of the house would always be his. Now, walking toward the house, James felt a little bit of peace. He was ready to take a shower, eat some bread, and fall into bed. But when he got to the gate, he stopped. The porch light was on. The curtains moved like someone had just looked outside. James took out his key and stepped closer, and then he felt it. Something was wrong, very wrong. James pushed the key into the lock and twisted. Nothing happened. He tried again, harder this time, jiggling the key like it might catch. But it didn't. The lock wouldn't turn. He frowned and looked up at the windows. The porch light above buzzed softly, and the front curtains swayed slightly, as if someone had just moved behind them. A shadow shifted. Then the door opened. Martha stepped out in a silk robe, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her lips were pressed in a thin line, her eyes sharp and cold. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at him like he was a stranger standing on the wrong porch. James let out a small, confused breath. "Hey, the key's not working. Did something happen to the lock?" Martha blinked slowly. "Yes. I had it changed." He stared at her, stunned. "You... what? Why?" "Because you don't live here anymore," she said simply, like she was discussing the weather. James froze. "What are you talking about? I just got off a shift. I live here. I help pay for this place, groceries, water, internet. You've been freeloading," she interrupted, her voice suddenly sharper. "This is my home now, and I'm tired of pretending you belong here." He shook his head slowly, trying to understand. "Dad promised..." "Your father isn't here, is he?" she snapped. "He left me in charge, not you." A soft chuckle floated down from above. James looked up to see Lydia leaning over the upstairs balcony in a tank top, holding her phone and smirking. Oh, poor James. Locked out after a long day saving lives. Maybe sleep on a hospital bench tonight. She burst into laughter like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. "Lydia, stop," James said, his voice tired but firm. "Oh, lighten up," she scoffed. "It's not like you were ever really part of this family." James looked back at Martha, hoping, maybe begging, for something human in her expression. Anything, but her face was stone. "This is my house now," she said again, "and I want you gone." He stared at her in disbelief. "After everything? After I..." "Good night, James," she said, stepping back into the house. The door clicked shut. The porch light flickered once and went dark. James stood there, still gripping the useless key in his hand. A hot breeze passed through the street, but his skin felt cold. He turned slowly, his chest hollow, and walked away. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay there. Not outside, not begging. Every step felt heavier than the last. By the time he reached the end of the street, he couldn't tell if the heat on his face was sweat or tears. All he knew was that he had never felt more alone. James sits in the park all night, no place to go. The bench is cold beneath him, even in the summer heat. The metal digs into his back, and the wood creaks each time he shifts. Above him, a single streetlight buzzes quietly, casting a pale yellow glow over the path and grass. Bugs flicker in and out of the light, and somewhere in the distance a car horn blares, but the world feels still. He doesn't even realize he's been sitting for hours. The key is still in his hand, pressed tight in his palm. His fingers have gone stiff. He stares ahead, unblinking. He keeps seeing the door closing in his face, and before that, the look in Martha's eyes, so cold, like he meant nothing. His mind drifts, and he finds himself reaching back to a different porch in a different summer. His mother's laughter rings softly in his ears. She was always humming while she worked, wiping her hands on her apron, pulling him into a hug even if he was sweaty from playing outside. She called him my James, not just with words, but with her heart. He could still picture the worn mat she kept by the front door, the one with the faded word, welcome. His mother never would have locked him out, even when she was tired, even when she was sick. She always made space for him. His throat tightens. Then came Martha. At first she was polite, quiet, almost invisible, but it didn't take long for her to start changing things. Little by little, his mother's touch vanished from the house, the curtains replaced, her garden dug up and paved over, her photos taken down. One by one, her memories were scrubbed out, like they were stains. James had tried to speak up once, but Martha's voice cut sharp. You live here, but you don't run it. And when his dad left for deployment again, everything got worse. Still, James stayed. Not because he was weak, but because his father had promised him something. This house will always be part yours, son, Colonel Henry had said once, hand on his shoulder. No matter what happens, you'll have a home. James breathes out, shaky. That promise. It matters. He's not just some squatter. He didn't imagine the way he kept the lights on, fixed the roof, cooked dinners when Martha wasn't in the mood. He didn't imagine the quiet nights studying in his room, saving every dollar, just trying to build something. Anger flickers beneath the sadness. It starts small, like a match struck in the dark, but it grows. Not loud, not violent, just firm. He closes his hand around the key and sits up straighter. They think they've won. They think locking him out will erase him like they erased his mother's touch. But he's not walking away that easy. He may not have a bed tonight. He may not even have a roof, but he still has his name. He still has that promise, and he still has fight. James contacts an old friend, gets a place to crash. It's almost morning when he finally reaches for his phone. The screen's nearly dead, and his fingers shake from the long night on the bench. But he scrolls through his contacts until he finds a name. David. They hadn't talked in months, maybe longer, but James hits call anyway. David picks up on the second ring, voice groggy. James. Man, it's late. You okay? I need a place to stay, James says, his voice low and rough. Just for a night or two, please. David doesn't ask questions. Come over. I'll unlock the gate. By the time James gets to David's small apartment, the sun is rising. The place is cramped and warm, but there's a mattress on the floor and a fan in the corner. It feels like a palace after a night outside. James thanks him quietly, then lies down without another word. A few hours later, after some restless sleep, he sits up and pulls out a worn folder from the bottom of his backpack. Inside are the papers his father gave him 2 years ago, documents most people wouldn't think twice about, but James had kept them safe. He unfolds one of them slowly, a photocopy of the property deed. It's official. The house is in both Colonel Henry's name and his own. His heart races. He hadn't imagined it. His father hadn't just said the words, he'd made it legal. James snaps a photo of the deed and opens his email app. He writes to his father, attaching the photo and explaining everything. How Martha changed the locks, how she told him to leave, how Lydia laughed from the balcony. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He asks for help. But more than that, he asks for justice. Then he begins searching online for legal aid clinics and housing lawyers. He doesn't have money for a private attorney, but he's not helpless. Not anymore. Back at the house, Martha is putting on a show. She's out in the front yard with Lydia, talking to neighbours in her best concerned mother voice. He's just been so aggressive lately, she says, sighing. We tried everything, but he wouldn't listen. Lydia chimes in, shaking her head with a fake frown. He's been slamming doors, yelling for no reason. I was scared. Honestly, the neighbour nods, half listening. That boy needs help, Martha adds. We had no choice but to protect ourselves. They smile as they lie, confident James has no voice left in the story. But what they don't know is, James just found his. A legal notice is delivered to Martha. James's name is on the house. It arrives on a Thursday morning, crisp envelope in the hand of a uniformed courier. Martha opens the door in her robe, half expecting a package. Instead, she's handed a stack of neatly stapled papers with the words, "Notice of legal interest and occupancy rights" printed across the top. Her face drops. She tears the envelope open right there on the porch. Her eyes skim the lines. James's name appears, clearly, unmistakably, beside Colonel Henry's on the deed. For a moment, her hands tremble. Then she slaps the papers against her thigh and storms inside, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. In the kitchen, she throws the notice on the counter and grabs a pair of scissors. With sharp, furious motions, she starts cutting the document into pieces. "Useless boy, thinks he can threaten me with paper," she mutters, breath coming fast. "Not in my house. Not after everything I've done." Lydia comes downstairs, phone in hand, yawning. "What's all the noise?" "He's trying to get back in," Martha hisses, holding up a jagged strip of the notice. "James, that little snake," Lydia frowns. "Didn't he leave already? He's trying to sue me." Lydia stares for a second, then scoffs. "He doesn't even have money for a decent pair of shoes. What lawyer's going to take his side?" But even as she says it, she opens her social media and starts typing. Post. "Can't believe someone who used to live with us is trying to claim a house he didn't pay for. Family means nothing to some people." Comments start rolling in, mostly sympathy, but a few aren't so supportive. Nurse Tanya. "That someone saved my father's life last week. Maybe don't lie online just because you're losing control." Jason RN. "James is one of the most decent people I've worked with. If you're attacking him, it says more about you than it does about him." Lydia glares at her screen. She blocks them quickly, but the damage is done. More people are starting to ask questions, and not everyone is buying the story anymore. Back at the house, Martha watches Lydia pacing, thumbs flying across her phone. "They're turning on us," Lydia mutters. "No," Martha says firmly, pacing now too. "We don't panic. We deny everything. We keep talking, loud and confident. The truth doesn't matter. What matters is what people believe." But even as she speaks, there's a flicker of something uneasy in her voice, because deep down, she knows, once the papers hit the porch, so did the truth, and the truth is starting to spread. The smear campaign begins like a slow poison. First, it's just a few comments under Lydia's post. Then, it spreads. Martha whispers to anyone who'll listen at church, at the corner store, even at the salon. Words like unstable, entitled, and ungrateful begin floating through the neighborhood. Online, Lydia shares vague, passive-aggressive posts. It's scary when people think they deserve what they didn't earn. Some folks really out here faking kindness just to play the victim later. The likes roll in. A few of her friends chime in, egging her on with comments like, "He always seemed off to me." And soon, strangers, people James has never met, are messaging him with insults. "Freeloader, man up, and move on. Nobody owes you anything." James reads them quietly from David's couch. At first, the sting cuts deep. He can barely eat. He deletes his social media apps, silences his notifications, and tells himself to breathe. David watches him from the kitchen, worry etched on his face. "You don't have to prove anything to them, you know. People who matter already know the truth." James nods, but the weight stays heavy. Then, something shifts. Tanya, the senior nurse from his ward, makes a post. "I've worked with James for over 2 years. He never asks for credit, never plays the victim. He's the one who stays late when no one else will. He's the one who held a grieving husband's hand when I couldn't." Others follow. Jason RN. "We need more nurses like James. Compassionate, dedicated, humble. Don't believe everything you read." A photo surfaces. James in scrubs, exhausted but smiling, sitting beside an elderly patient holding his hand. It's shared by a patient's family member with the caption, "This young man helped my father die with dignity. That's who he is." The tide begins to turn. And just when James thinks he might be alone in all this, an email notification pings. It's from Colonel Henry. No words, just a video file. James opens it. The screen shows his father, dressed in fatigues, seated on a folding chair inside what looks like a military tent. His voice is firm, direct. "To anyone questioning my son's character, stop. James has done more for that household than anyone else. The house is legally part his. I gave it to him, and if I were home, none of this would be happening. Henry pauses, eyes intense. Son, I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I'm proud of you, and I'm with you. The video ends. James sits in silence, then wipes his eyes. He doesn't need to respond to the lies. The truth is speaking now, and it's growing louder. Court day comes. The air is heavy with tension. James stands outside the courthouse in a plain button-down shirt, gripping a thin folder in one hand. His face is calm, but the sweat on his palms betrays the weight of the moment. David gives him a firm pat on the back. You've got this. Just tell the truth. Let the papers speak. Inside, the courtroom buzzes with quiet murmurs. On the other side of the aisle, Martha sits in a tailored suit, stiff and composed, her lips pressed into a thin line. Lydia scrolls on her phone beside her, smug and unbothered. When the judge enters, everyone stands. The session begins. James is called to speak first. He steps forward, hands slightly shaking, and lays his folder on the table. My name is James Henry, he begins steadily. I've lived in that house since I was 7. After my mother died, my father remarried. I continued living there, contributing financially and emotionally to the household. This deed, he holds up the document, shows that my father added me to the property title before he was deployed. The judge studies the document carefully. James continues, placing printed bank statements on the table. These show regular payments I made toward utilities, groceries, and maintenance. I was working double shifts to help. I never thought I'd be kicked out of my own home. There's a silence in the room. Martha takes the stand next. She clears her throat dramatically. James hasn't contributed a dime. That house was always mine. His father put his name there temporarily, for some tax reason, I don't know. He was never meant to stay. The judge raises an eyebrow. You're saying Mr. Henry never lived there as a resident? No, Your Honor. He moved out ages ago. The judge frowns and gestures to the clerk. Bring me Exhibit C. It's a set of printed screenshots. Lydia's social media posts. One shows a recent photo of James sitting on the front porch, with the caption, "Still lives here, still lazy." Another, posted only a month ago, reads, "Can't wait for James to move out already." The courtroom murmurs. Martha's face pales. The judge looks over his glasses at her. You said he hadn't lived there in some time. Martha stammers. That was just Lydia venting, not accurate. The judge taps his gavel once. Enough. He turns to James. I've reviewed the deed, the bank statements, the letter from your father, and the contradictory testimony. There is no question. You are a legal co-owner of the property. He faces Martha and Lydia. You have 7 days to vacate the premises. Gavel slams. Case closed. James exhales. For the first time in weeks, the air feels a little lighter. The truth, quiet, patient, and steady, had won, and justice had finally come home. Martha and Lydia have 7 days to vacate. The house felt strangely silent after they left, like a heavy curtain had finally been pulled back. James stepped inside quietly, the floorboards creaking softly under his feet. Every corner held memories, some painful, some comforting, but now the emptiness made room for something new. He wandered through the rooms, touching the worn walls as if to remind himself this was finally his home again. The air carried a faint scent of his mother's lavender perfume, lingering stubbornly despite everything. Then he remembered the attic, the place where he had stored some of his mother's things long ago. Dusty and dim, it was tucked away from the world. He climbed the narrow stairs slowly, heart pounding with a mix of hope and nostalgia. In the attic, beneath an old blanket, he found a small wooden box. Opening it carefully, he pulled out his mother's diary, its pages yellowed with age but still filled with her neat, flowing handwriting. He sat down on a dusty trunk and began to read. Her words were soft but steady, full of love and quiet strength. No matter how hard the storm, home is where the heart holds on. Keep kindness alive, hold on to hope, and remember that love always finds its way back. Those words settled inside him like a gentle healing balm. For the first time in months, James felt a calmness he hadn't known he needed. Setting the diary aside, he made his way downstairs and went to the guest room. He unpacked a small box of belongings he'd kept for his father, fresh sheets, a few books, a framed photo, and arranged everything with care. Soon, Colonel Henry would come home from deployment, and James wanted the house to feel ready for him. That night, James sat by the window, sipping tea and thinking about the days ahead. His phone buzzed quietly with messages from co-workers and friends, their support wrapping around him like a warm blanket. He knew challenges would still come, but for now, he had reclaimed more than just a house. He had found a place to heal, to hope, and to begin again. Tomorrow, the hospital would call him back to work, but tonight, James allowed himself a quiet victory. Colonel Henry comes home from deployment. The moment James heard the familiar rumble of the car pulling up the driveway, his heart quickened. After months of waiting, the day had finally arrived. The front door creaked open, and there stood his father, worn but smiling, eyes bright with relief. James rushed forward, and they embraced tightly, holding on as if afraid to let go. Years of silence, frustration, and worry melted away in that hug. Inside, they settled at the kitchen table, the soft summer light casting warm shadows around them. Henry's voice trembled as he spoke. "James, I'm sorry. I trusted Martha blindly. I should have seen what was happening. You didn't deserve any of it." James looked down for a moment, then met his father's eyes. "It's not your fault, Dad. Things happen. What matters is we move forward, together." They talked late into the night, sharing stories, regrets, and hopes for the future. Inspired by his own journey, James decided to dedicate one room in the house to young nurses who, like him once, might be struggling or displaced. A place of rest and support. A small refuge in a demanding world. Weeks later, after a long shift at the hospital, James's phone buzzed with a message from one of the young nurses who had stayed in his guest room. "You made a difference in my life. Thank you." James smiled softly, knowing that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could light the darkest hallways. Hey besties, thanks so much for sticking around till the end. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Love you all. See you in the next one.